Welcome back to your daily bedtime stories. Tonight's story is A Picture Book of Anne Frank by David A. Adler, illustrated by Karen Ritz. Published by Scholastic. Anne Frank was born on June 12, 1929, in Frankfurt am Main, Germany. Her parents were Otto and Edith Frank. Anne had an older sister, Margot. Anne's father was a businessman and had been a German army officer during the First World War. His family had lived in Frankfurt for hundreds of years. Anne was born during very difficult times. Millions of Germans were out of work. As people became more troubled, they listened to the hate-filled speeches of Adolf Hitler, the Nazi party leader. Hitler blamed Germany's problems on various groups of innocent people, but mostly on the Jews. In January 1933, following an election, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. Jews lost their jobs. Their stores were boycotted. Books written by Jews were burned. The Franks were Jewish and felt they had to leave their home and country. They moved to Amsterdam, Holland, where they thought they would be safe. Anne's first years in Amsterdam were peaceful. At the Montessori school, her class were asked to write plays. Anne was full of ideas. When the plays were put on, Anne was given the best parts because she was lively and outgoing. Anne dreamed of becoming a writer or a movie star. But the hatred the Franks had escaped in Germany followed them. In 1939, the Second World War began. The German army conquered one European country after another. In May 1940, Holland was invaded. Now there was no escape. Nazi soldiers guarded the train stations and the borders. If somehow a Jew did get out, there was almost no place to go. Country after country declared itself closed to Jewish refugees. Jews in Amsterdam were forced to wear yellow stars on their clothing, so everyone would know who they were. They were not allowed in movie theatres, parks or swimming pools, or to ride in cars, trains, or even on bicycles. Dutch schools were closed to Jewish children. Anne was taken out of the Montessori school and sent to the Jewish secondary school. In June 1942, Anne celebrated her 13th birthday. She was given several gifts, including a book of blank pages. Anne made it her diary and named it Kitty. On Sunday, July 5th, 1942, Anne's older sister Margot was ordered to report to labor camp, where she would work in a factory. There were other camps too, where Jews were sent, camps where they were tortured and killed. Jews were often taken from one camp to another. The Franks knew that if Margot obeyed the Nazi order, they might never see her again. To avoid this, their family went into hiding. Otto Frank had prepared a secret annex, or apartment, in the upstairs of the building at his place of work. Anne and her family needed to take clothing to the hideaway, but they couldn't be seen outside carrying suitcases. That would be a sure sign they were trying to escape. So early Monday morning, Anne put on 2 vests, 3 pairs of pants, a dress, a skirt, and a jacket. Anne wrote in her diary that we put on heaps of clothes, as if we were going to the North Pole. Anne also carried her school bag. She could have packed it with clothes, but she didn't. She put in books, old letters, and her diary. Memory means more to me than dresses, Anne wrote later. There were just 4 rooms and an attic in the secret apartment. The Franks shared it with 4 friends who were also in hiding from the Nazis. Mr. and Mrs. Van Daan, their son, Peter, and a dentist, Mr. Albert Dussel. A movable bookcase was built to hide the stairs leading to the apartment. When friends of the Franks were sure no one was watching, they brought them food, magazines, and other things. These brave Dutch people were risking their lives. They could have been sent away too, if the Nazis discovered they were helping Jews. During work hours, when people were in the office and the warehouse below, Anne and the others had to be especially quiet. They could only whisper. Anne pasted pictures of movie stars on the walls of her small room. At first, she was happy there. She wrote in her diary that hiding was like being on vacation in a very peculiar boarding house. Soon, however, she tired of it. Day after day, the food was mostly the same. After 8 months, Anne wrote, "We've eaten so many kidney beans and haricot beans that I can't bear the sight of them anymore." And she was with the same people all the time. They often argued. At night, Anne heard the frightening sound of large rats running about. She heard burglars robbing the warehouse below, and often the sounds of sirens, gunfire, and bombs falling outside. After 18 months in the hideaway, Anne wrote, "I am longing, so longing for everything, to talk, for freedom, for friends, to be alone. But I do so long to cry." But Anne knew she was lucky. While she was hiding, other Jews had been rounded up by the Nazis. Anne hid for more than 2 years. She wrote in her diary news of the war and of her growing love for Peter Van Daan, who was hiding there too. By the middle of 1944, Germany was losing the war. Anne and the others knew that they could stay in hiding a while longer. They might be saved. But on Friday, August the 4th, 1944, their luck ran out. The Nazis found out about the hideaway and broke in. Anne and the others were sent in locked railway cars to Westerbroek, a camp in eastern Holland. 1 month later they were loaded onto another train. Otto Frank knew that his family might be separated. He gave them an address in Switzerland where they could meet again after the war. After 2 days and nights of travelling, the doors to the train were open. They had been taken to Auschwitz, a Nazi death camp in Poland. Anne saw a sign above the entrance to the camp. "Arbeit macht frei. Work will make you free." But that was a lie. When prisoners arrived at Auschwitz, some were selected for immediate death. Others, like Anne, were saved for work. But working in the cold with little food or clothing and suffering beatings led to death too. Anne's hair was shaved off. she lost weight. But according to a woman prisoner who was also at Auschwitz and somehow survived, Anne was still lively and sweet. In October, Anne and Margot were taken to Bergen-Belsen, a camp in Germany, where there was little food and water, and plenty of disease. Margot and Anne got sick with typhus in late February or early March of 1945. Margot, and later Anne, died of disease and hunger. Anne Frank was just 15 years old. On May the 8th, 1945, the war in Europe ended. During the course of the war, 6 million Jews were murdered by the Nazis. 1.5 million of the victims were children. Of the 120,000 Jews who had lived in Holland in 1940, just 14,000 survived. Of the 8 who hid in the secret apartment in Amsterdam, only Otto Frank was left. The Nazi murdered millions of others too, including cripples, the mentally ill, beggars, Russian prisoners of war, Romanis, homosexuals, and communists. Otto Frank returned to Amsterdam. Someone had found Anne's diary and had given it to him. The diary was first published in 1947. Since then, it has been translated into more than 50 languages. Many millions of people have read Anne's diary. They have learned from it the horrors of war and the terrible price paid in lives and human suffering for prejudice and hatred. Some people find it difficult to understand the enormous tragedy of the Holocaust, the organized murder of millions of people. But when they read Anne's diary, it all becomes real. Then they know one of the victims. They know Anne Frank. The end. Sleep tight and don't let the bed bugs bite.